Pope Francis' funeral has been set for Saturday at 10 a.m. in St. Peter's Square. A viewing of his body will begin for ordinary faithful in St. Peter's Basilica on Wednesday. The Vatican says around 60 cardinals met there today to chart funeral plans and next steps before a conclave begins to choose Francis' successor. And to the succession, after the 11 o'clock news, I'll chat with Mark McGowan, professor of history at the University of St. Michael's College in Toronto, who's an expert in all of this, and he suggests that none of Canada's 5 cardinals likely to be the next pope for a variety of reasons. Anyway, Mark McGowan will join me to talk about all of this after the 11 o'clock news. That it was the time available, and I realize that that cuts in a bit into our call-in segment, but I feel as though I made the decision that it was important that we covered this. And then we will open the phone lines after I chat with the professor, and we'll take your calls between about 11:15 and noon today. So again, thanks so much for tuning in and listening. We appreciate it very much. Again, we will cover the Pope's passing and the next steps throughout the week. And again, we will chat with the professor of history at the University of St. Michael's College in Toronto, Mark McGowan, after the 11 o'clock news. And then take your calls. And perhaps some of you may or may not want to talk about the Pope. I realize that the Pope's coverage is everywhere. We're inundated with this, and this is going to be one of the questions that I'm going to ask. Is why do you think that people are so enthralled with this, so captured by this, so captivated by this? Is it nostalgia? Is it tradition? What is going on here? Is there too much attention given to the Pope and the passing? And do you believe that the Pope represents God on earth? Because that is the claim, that is the belief that Catholics have, that and some non-Catholics have as well. That the Pope represents God and communes directly in some way with God. And these are some of the things that I'll ask you to talk about again when we open the phone lines after I have my chat with the professor. Also, the latest Ipsos poll conducted exclusively for Global News found that the Liberals are still in the lead but are now just 3 points ahead of the Conservatives, who continue to gain momentum in the home stretch. The results of the poll conducted after last week's televised leaders debate show 41% of surveyed Canadians would vote for the Liberals, down 1 point from last week, while 38% said they'd choose the Conservatives, who gained 2 points. Are you still undecided, or have you made up your mind? Those are a couple of questions that I'll ask you. Do you believe in that? Do you believe what the polls are saying? Because again, depending on it's like polls. If you're up and you're leading, then polls are great, and you think they're accurate. If you're trailing, then you don't. That's kind of the way it is. That's how polling works. What are your thoughts on the ballot box question? Has it changed? What is, in your opinion, the ballot box question? Is trust a key factor? Who do you trust? And what's your take on natural resources and affordability, the economy, and all these other big issues that are at play when it comes to this election? So some big questions that we'll ask you. Also, we're going to have a pretty heavy focus this week, throughout the week, including today, with some local candidates running in the election. I think it's an important part of democracy that we do so we will do that, including 3 candidates that later on this hour. And again, throughout the week, we will chat with local candidates as well. So thanks again for tuning in and listening. Vanessa's away today, by the way. Blake Priddle is behind the glass at the control boards. So thanks to Blake Priddle. All right. This story, how a group is raising awareness for crosswalk safety in the Halifax area. I saw this on the CTV website. A pedestrian safety project in partnership with Crosswalk Safety Society of Nova Scotia held an awareness walk Saturday. And joining me to talk about all of this is Norm Collins, President and Treasurer of the Crosswalk Safety Society of Nova Scotia. Norm, thanks for joining me here in studio.
My pleasure.
All right, so Norm, I guess a bit about the Crosswalk Safety Society of Nova Scotia. A little history lesson how you became involved with this.
The Crosswalk Safety Society has been around formally since 2016. I became involved with crosswalk safety in 2007 after the deaths of 2 teenagers in Dartmouth in the previous year in 2006. We had this idea to do something to improve crosswalk safety in our neighborhood, that being the crosswalk flags, which no doubt people see throughout the city, and got the okay from HRM to install them. And what happened was others saw them in our neighborhood, which is in Dartmouth, and we got a number of requests and ended up installing them elsewhere, et cetera, so much so that we actually formalized. We have a society, not-for-profit, registered with CRA, board, and all that kind of stuff. And our primary objective is to advocate for and do research for improved fundamentally crosswalk safety, but that stretches into pedestrian and road safety as well.
So the Pedestrian Safety Project, in partnership with you guys, held an awareness session on Saturday. Tell us about how well attended it was, or who attended.
Yeah,
what the numbers looked like.
This was initiated not by our society, although we very much supported and funded the event. It was initiated by a few people in the north end of Dartmouth who are very concerned about speeding, number of vehicles that just blow through crosswalks, et cetera. And they took it upon themselves to do something, which I think is fantastic, and put together this meeting, if you want to call it that, with a panel. It was an interesting panel with Councillor Sam Austin, MLA Sue LeBlanc, me, a couple of representatives of Wagner's Law, and some police officers. It's hard to know what kind of attendance you'd expect for something like this. Yeah. There were maybe 20 people who were there in attendance. You always would hope for more. Got some excellent media attention, and because of that, I'm here today. Yeah. So that's great. There was some really good discussion, some good questions, expressions of frustration from the audience. Very successful, and I commend Rebecca Cameron and her group for taking the initiative and putting this on. They did a great job. Okay,
according to I'm reading from the CTV story, according to Halifax Regional Police, there have been at least 25 pedestrian vehicle collisions so far this year, with some resulting in fatalities. Hard to believe, eh? 25 already this year.
Well, it's more than 25. It's a lot more than 25. Yeah. Actually, to the end of February, it was 31.
Why the number 25 then? The police
because, and we've asked this question, that is just Halifax Regional Police. It does not include the RCMP. Gotcha. And HRM is HRM, and I get frustrated when they provide just a part of the number, because then it understates the actual seriousness of the issue here. And I wish that they'd coordinate with their RCMP partners and provide, a total numbers, et cetera.
The total is the total is again 32, you said?
32, but only to the end of February. Yeah. There's a database on the Halifax website called Open Data, and that provides data, but it's 1 month deferred. So right now they have data up to the end of February, and it was 31 to the end of February if you count the 2 fatalities. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing the number now is, in the 40s or 50s, but that's just a guess at this point.
Wow.
And what's probably even more important is last year there were 152 pedestrian injuries. That is the most since at least 2018. Okay, and it's about 40% higher than the goal that was set when the strategic road framework was adopted in 2018, which was a 20% improvement. And 152 collisions is more than 40% above that 107 target that was set at that time. So, and some people will say, well, the population's increased. It hasn't increased that much. Yeah. And at the end of the day, to the person who's struck and injured, they don't much care whether the population is increased or not. And vision zero is to get to zero. It doesn't matter what the population is. So, sadly, over the last, 8 years, I guess, 7 years since, we started with the formal, strategic framework, things have gotten worse for pedestrians, not better. And that's why, this group, Rebecca and her group, were concerned because they don't see improvement. They see a lot of close calls. They see vehicles blowing through crosswalks, and they wanted to do something about it. And that's why, we continue to need to get out and, make people aware of that the issue's not being sufficiently addressed.
All right. What are some of the contributing factors here? Why the numbers? You mentioned population increase, but that only goes so far. So what's happening here?
Well, it clearly, in our view, speed is the single most significant issue. I think, if you're out there driving, even coming in today, the number of vehicles, that were blowing by me, I was doing the speed limit, and is significant. So why are people speeding? Well, part of that answer is because of the insufficient enforcement. If you look at the number of speeding tickets in 2012, there were 11,954 speeding tickets in HRM, and in 2023 it had dropped to 1,901. I think that's an 85% decrease.
Whoa.
Why that's happening, we've asked, police, and we don't get a sort of satisfactory answer. It's, we don't have enough officers, and people are, the other part of the issue is automatic speed enforcement, traffic enforcement.
Right. Yeah.
Every province has it except Nova Scotia. It's supposedly part of the new Traffic Safety Act, which was passed in 2018, but has not yet been proclaimed. And as a result, we don't have automatic speed enforcement, a.k.a. photo radar.
Are those red light cameras? Is that what they are?
Yeah, that's essentially what they are, to catch people going through red light, but, just to monitor their speed and automatically issue tickets without police involvement. And that would be a great step forward. Edmonton is a city whose numbers and experience has improved greatly, and they attribute that primarily to the fact that they have serious photo radar and automatic ticketing.
So what's the reason why dragging our heels on this? What's the issue?
I don't know. I guess, you have to ask premiers and MLAs. It's hard to know what, why their priorities are what they are. Mm-hmm. And I do understand that we've been told, there's systems in behind, and you got to get, Department of Justice to talk to Service Nova Scotia and all of that kind of stuff. And fair enough. You didn't expect the act to be passed and this to all snap your fingers and it would be all, up and running. But it's 6.5 years later, and people are getting struck, and people are getting hit, people are getting injured, people are getting killed. We've had 5 pedestrian fatalities since the fall. And, you keep getting this, the systems aren't ready yet. And that's just not good. It should not be good enough for the public.
Well, especially considering every other province has figured it out.
Exactly. Exactly.
It comes down to that, right?
Why we're so behind the times is very perplexing.
Yeah, for sure. All right. I often hear people complain about people just kind of sauntering out in front of traffic without looking, or pressing the button and just moseying out without having a look. What are your thoughts on that?
I've heard that. I've seen it. And, certainly we'll be the first to say pedestrians have responsibility for their own safety. Certainly, that having been said, anytime a pedestrian and a vehicle are going to come together, it's the, pedestrian is going to suffer the most. So clearly, if you're just pushing a button or, jumping out on the crosswalk without being attentive, I would question your attention to your own safety. But it is ultimately the driver who is responsible for yielding to the pedestrian, and the drivers need to be significantly more attentive. They need to drive to the speed limit. If you're going faster, your reaction time is less, the likelihood of a collision is greater, and the seriousness of that collision will be greater. So everybody needs to be more attentive, more careful, including the pedestrians. But I don't think that that's the primary, issue or the problem. It's not that it doesn't happen, but
Okay, marked crosswalks and the lights and all of that stuff, that's improved, but we could do better there as well.
Yeah, certainly every year we add, 10 marked crosswalks, and people need to understand what an unmarked crosswalk is. The responsibility for yielding to a pedestrian at an unmarked crosswalk is the same as a marked crosswalk. Every intersection has unmarked crosswalks. But, the city certainly has done stuff over the years. They've put in more marked crosswalks. They're now putting in more, improved durable paint. They've allowed crosswalk flags. They've installed many of these rectangular rapid flashing beacons, which are very effective. But there's also a lot more that they could do. I just returned from a trip. I was in Spain, and they have in advance of particularly the roundabouts. They have a lot more roundabouts in Europe. They have rumble strips, 5 sets of rumble strips. So as you're coming up to that roundabout, you know that there's something. They have rumble strips in front of marked crosswalks. They have rumble strips in front of, in one case in Sevilla, in front of a signalized intersection that I experienced. So there are other things that can be done. And clearly, if there's 10 new marked crosswalks, there are many, many locations where there aren't marked crosswalks. It is egregious to me that you can get off a bus and there's enough volume that there's a transit stop. People have to cross a 3 or 4. There's one example out in Cole Harbour. There's another one in Bedford. People have to cross multiple lanes, and there's no marked crosswalk. And I just do not understand why those are not priorities and why we don't, if as the integrated mobility plan says, pedestrians are our top priority. We seem to get caught up with these, staff have been made aware of these locations and situations, and nothing gets done. Even in this year's capital budget, those particular locations, there's no plan to improve pedestrian safety. Yet you've got people coming off buses. We want to encourage buses. They get off buses, and then they're immediately put in some danger. Yeah.
Norm, can people check out online some of the safety tips and what you guys are all about, what you guys do?
Yeah, we have 3 websites. First one is, if you want to learn anything about our society, www.crosswalksafetysociety.com. And then there's one that talks about crosswalk safety in general, which is just crosswalk safety. And then finally, there's one on the crosswalk flag installations, www.crosswalkflags.ca. So people can go to those. If people have any questions or issues or want crosswalk flags at their location, please just email me at crosswalksafety@eastlink.ca.
Okay, great. Thanks for coming in, Norm. Appreciate it as always.
My pleasure. As I said, I wish I wasn't here. It's sadly whenever I'm in front of the media, it's because something's happened or whatever. But good that the media and yourself respond and provide this forum for getting the message out.
Okay, thanks, Norm. That's Norm Collins with the President and Treasurer of Crosswalk Safety Society of Nova Scotia. When we come back, a chat with the candidate for Halifax West. We'll be back. All right, joining me here in studio is Ray Tench, NDP candidate for Halifax West. Ray, nice seeing you, my friend.
Nice seeing you again too, Todd.
Yeah. So you're back in the political waters. What's going on?
Well, I always had an interest in being in politics.
Yeah.
From the time I was little. We came here in '67. I was 9 years old, and I always watched the parliamentary debate going on. I had very little idea what the heck they were doing, but I just thought, this is really cool watching these guys go back and forth. And then there was very respectful. You had the Broadbands and the Creshans and all those guys. And then as time went on, I ended up running into Frank McKenna because I worked at a bank in Fredericton. So I'd go to work in the morning, park my car, and he'd be going to the legislature, walking at 6 a.m. he was going. And we just said hi, and then the next day we'd say hello, and we end up talking. So that was an influence as well. And then, of course, the others in the NDP. Now, some would ask, Todd, why the NDP, right? Well, the reason for the NDP, it has the values that I am interested in. They look at families. They look at everybody. We didn't grow up rich. I mean, we weren't poor, but we didn't grow up rich. Yeah. And my parents were provincial employees, sorry. So we always had service involved. And then I did an aptitude test back in the day. And it said that if I make a lot of money and not provide good service to people, I won't last long.
Right.
And the same conversely, if I made no money and I served a lot of people, I won't last long either. So anyway, this decision was made a while ago in my head. But as you know, I worked for financial institutions, and you're not allowed really to express your political opinion or your religious opinion. Wasn't heard of. And I always had one, but I never said anything. So here's the time, I'm sorry, that things happen, and I think it's a time to do it as well.
Okay, so what do you think your chances are of winning this seat?
I feel it's pretty good, and the reason why I do is I've been talking to a lot of people around, and we know that the Conservatives, and by the way, Halifax West has been redefined per se. So now we include Terrence Bay, Shad Bay, and right around into Tantallon. So Bedford, even though I know it was a Liberal stronghold, Bedford did well, and I will give them that. However, it's different. So that area now, my kids, I grew up in Clayton Park, Fairview. I lived in Timberley, brought up my family there when I was here. Other times I was transferred with the institution that I work with, the New Brunswick. But so it's very different. And when I'm knocking at doors talking to people, they're concerned. And you talk about what's the big concern. Well, I will tell you it's affordability. It's not first on hand, it's not the tariffs. They're concerned. Of course, they're concerned about their jobs, but they're concerned more about health care. They're concerned about whether when they get unemployed, what's going to happen there. Right? They want to make sure that there's food still on, be able to put food on the table and pay their rent. So in that area, that's what I'm getting at the doors everywhere first. But once again, they're talking about, well, who's going to win this thing? They're watching the polls. Well, to me, the only poll that matters is the date of the election. So that's my concern, is what their concerns are. And as far as that area, had the PCs haven't won Halifax West in over 30 years. Okay, so I'm not concerned about them, and I'm telling these voters, don't concern yourself about them. We're concerned more about the Liberal side of things. Now, as far as the Liberals, they've been in 8-9 years. And we know they fell asleep at the wheel. I'm being quite frank here. And they changed one leader. And it's still, the soldiers are still there. It's still the same individuals that had those. But
it's been the NDP. But it's been the NDP that's propped up that government, though, has it not been?
And yeah, that is very true. And we had to get things done. So we were able to get free pharmacare, it's still being worked on. Free health care, what we augmented, free dental care. And now we're looking at diabetes drugs. So we had to have them there, and there was only 25 of us in Ottawa, pushing them to get this done. So with a small amount of NDPs, we can get things done because we'll fight for them.
Jagmeet Singh, do you have full confidence in Jagmeet Singh's leadership?
I do.
Tell me why.
I've had a chance to meet him a couple times since he's been down. We've talked, and what he's about is he's sincere. He really, really, really wants to ensure that the average Canadian and when he's here, the average Tarragonian is able to be represented, and he will push that. I will say that the NDP should, I think, blow their horn a little louder, because I'll tell you, when the postal workers were on strike, I went in there and I stood with some of them, and they said they saw no one else of any stripe come in there. Okay, same thing with the librarians up in Clayton Park. That's where I went up to that one. And the CN workers, right? So we're always there for the unions. We're always there to support them. Liberals, they'll legislate them back to work like they did. So Jagmeet is always in support of that. And the healthcare, which he tried to push in the debate many, many times to make people realize that our nurses, the system is broken in the sense that we can't seem to communicate what's happening or fix it, because everyone seems to be kicking it around. At the end of the day, the nurses are getting tired. We need more nurses. We need more doctors. The entire healthcare professionals, we need them. They're going to leave this industry, and we need them. So we're looking at supporting them to make sure that we get doctors and nurses and healthcare workers there. My mom was a healthcare worker. She worked and we were immigrants. So when she came up, my dad was a chartered accountant. He was here 2 years before. And then we came up, 5 kids and my mom. She was a midwife. She came here. She couldn't find work. They wouldn't accept what she had. So they were kind enough to, I'll say kind enough because she was pretty disappointed. They were kind enough to pay to look after her education. And she ended up turning around and being a scrub nurse. She ended up in neurosurgery. And when she died, you should see the whole crowd that came out. All the healthcare was there. So I'm familiar with the healthcare side of things. I'm familiar with the immigrant side of things. And these individuals are here. We just got to start breaking down the barriers and finding the doctors and lawyers, and healthcare workers. There's a whole bunch of professionals that we can look at and bring them in.
Okay, Ray, we're tight on time, but if people want to know more about Ray Tench, do you have an online presence?
Yes, I do. You can just go to ray.tench at ndp.ca. Read more about me and my background. And
Ray's R-A-E.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I got someone said the other day that they thought it was a woman, and I've had that my whole life.
Yeah, sure. That's no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, ray.tench.
At ndp.ca.
Okay, and this week you'll be out banging on doors and
continuing to do it. I've been doing it all winter.
Last minute push, eh?
Last minute push, my friend.
Okay, Ray, thanks for coming in, my friend. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
And best of luck.
Thank you, Todd.
All right, take care. That's Ray Tench running for the NDP in Halifax West. When we come back, and I'll chat with a Liberal candidate for the South Shore St. Margaret's. We'll be back. All right, we've got a federal election coming up in just under a week, and we're chatting with local candidates throughout the week as much as we possibly can. Joining me here in studio is Jessica Fancy Landry, Liberal candidate for South Shore St. Margaret's. Jessica, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you so much, Todd, for having me. I'm really excited about the opportunity to speak with you today.
All right. So tell us, you've got a pretty involved website, lots of information there. Why don't you give some people about the background of what you're all about?
Yeah, a little bit about myself. I am a true South Shore St. Margaret's girl. It's where I was born and raised. I am an educator by trade. Mm-hmm. I've been an educator for almost 2 decades.
By educator, you mean teacher?
Yes, teacher, administrator, a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And from there, working in nonprofit sector as just recently a board chair for Rural Community Foundation of Nova Scotia. So one of our 3 community foundations. So nonprofit work, a lot of volunteerism, coaching.
Okay. What drew you to politics?
Yeah, so it kind of lends itself as an educator and working with so many people over the years. And I had written a research article that won me an award on some rural education development, which kind of bled into me working in nonprofit on a volunteer basis through the Rural Communities Foundation. And from there, it kind of just lends itself into next steps. Mm-hmm. Last fall, I've been part of my federal electoral district association with the Liberal Party mm-hmm. for 3.5 years now as their community outreach director. So last fall, I received the official ask from Ottawa to run.
Yeah. And we were chatting off air. You weren't Mark Carney. Here I am. You were ready to run before Mark Carney.
No,
came
definitely
on the scene,
not.
Right?
Yeah, thank you, Todd. Definitely not one of the bandwagoners. Yeah. I'll never forget the date. I put my package in October 7th. Mm-hmm. So knowing that it's a value system and now having the leadership race and having Mark Carney, I'm very proud to know that my future boss is the adult at the table.
Yeah. So you were willing to support Justin Trudeau?
I was willing to support the party and the constituents for South Shore St. Margaret's.
Okay, so do you think Mark Carney is an upgrade?
I wouldn't say an upgrade, but I do know that with the threats of tariffs and mm-hmm. with Trump, and when I look at the different leaders in this election, at their resumes and whatnot, that mm-hmm. we have a very experienced leader who has dealt with uncertainty before. Mm-hmm. And like I said, to steer the ship and be that adult at the table. Why do you call him the adult at the table? Because I think in terms of dealing with President Trump, we really need someone to command that respect mm-hmm. and unite us as Canadians. And, for the good or the bad, Trump has really united nationalism here mm-hmm. in Canada. So that's what I mean by that. Okay. And Poilievre doesn't have those capabilities, those qualities, in your opinion? Yeah. Like I just mentioned, Todd, when you look at the resumes in impact and intention, I think that Carney is the guy that we need to go with.
Okay, so when it comes to some of the key issues that you're hearing in at the doorsteps, what are you hearing most?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and it depends on where you are riding. Like within our
Yeah.
riding, we have one of the second largest ridings here in Nova Scotia. As an umbrella statement, I would definitely say affordability. I would say housing, which is why I am excited for our Let's Build section to the campaign that Carney has announced regarding the development of new housing projects and how we're going to do that. So for me, it's nice having someone with that jumpstarting the economy. I've always felt that I'm a fiscally responsible liberal, but as an educator with a social lens. So it's nice seeing someone that has, we need to jumpstart the economy, but always centering on we have to put people first. So I feel like my personal value system aligns with the value system of the Liberal Party and where it's going.
Okay, housing. It's been the Liberal government's 10 years that has been a part of the problem, part of the challenge that's led to the housing crisis with immigration over, I guess, ambitious immigration targets. What's your response to that?
I think the response is with the uncertainty within our economy and needing as many houses. I like what Prime Minister Carney has said regarding it's time to jumpstart and let's build. Like this is a wartime economy and we need to put up those houses as fast as possible. And how are we going to do it? We're going to help build our tradespeople and cut some of that red tape. It's so nice to hear people saying we need to shake down the 13 silos here provincially and territorially in Canada and start working together and using Canadian products to do that.
Yeah, as a non-incumbent, I guess you have the luxury of saying, I wasn't involved.
As a first-time candidate, I guess you could say that,
that's
Todd.
Right,
yes.
that's right. And Mark Carney's kind of said the same thing, right? And that all said, though, Mark Carney is, and look, I'm asking you to speak for Mark Carney. Perhaps that's not fair, but he being the leader has been the advisor or a financial advisor, to which degree we are not sure, to the previous Liberal government, which enacted a lot of these policies. And I'm sure you hear this, right? Do people say to you, like Mark Carney was a trusted advisor of the Liberals, why should we trust him now? What's going to be different now? What do you say to that?
Yeah, I see. They look at that kind of 10-year lens and they forget that back in 2007, 2008, when we were once again facing a financial crisis, he was brought on board through the Harper government as well to help. Then you look to Brexit and helping. So his knowledge base and Rolodex of people will really help bolster the standing of here in Canada, especially in economic sense. So it's not his first time coming to help in different ways. So for me, that act of service that I think is intuitive to him, it really speaks to his character. Yeah. Party by party. You're asking me about the Liberal government, but he's also helped us out during Conservative government as well.
Okay, concerning the Trump factor and tariffs and all of that's a huge issue, though. What are your thoughts on the party and what the Liberals might or might not be able to do with that?
Well, I think to quote Prime Minister Carney, and I was very proud when he said this. He said, "You know what, Donald? I'm busy running a country. You can call me." And I felt like that commanded the respect that we need as Canadians. Donald Trump calls him and they had that discussion where he was not called governor. He was called prime minister. So I think it's that collegial aspect. And when I say, there's an adult at the table, that's kind of what I'm referring to. There's a certain level of respect that someone like Prime Minister Carney commands.
Justin Trudeau didn't command that respect then?
Well, I think that there was past history where Trump was in previously between him and Justin, and I think with Prime Minister Carney that Donald Trump knows he's a smart man.
Okay. When it comes to the environment, there's a lot of concern about, not concern, but debate over pipeline expansion and development of natural resources. What's your stance on the environment and natural resources? Yeah,
so my first degree, Todd, is actually in biology and pieces of that being conservation biology. So I am an environmentalist. I also feel like it's time for us to start redeveloping our own projects. So that being said, I look forward to some of the ideas and action items that the Liberal government comes up with in regards to our own energy solutions, but also keeping that environmental and sustainability lens at first and foremost in everything that we do.
Okay. What about a pipeline, West-East pipeline? Do you support that concept?
I support, we need to start working within our economy, going east to west and opening up other trade markets. I think that within Canada, that's something that we have to have discussions with at all levels of government and all levels of people.
Okay. So I guess the answer is perhaps.
Yeah. Yes.
What about here provincially? Tim Houston's talked a lot about expanding natural resources, shale gas and uranium, lithium development. What's your take on that?
Yeah, for me, being from South Shore St. Margaret's, where we do have a couple of uranium deposits and we do have potential for, fracking off our coast, that's a hard stop for me. In terms of the environmental piece and having influence at a federal level to help have those conversations with the province. I know that in Nova Scotia, 75% of our freshwater systems come from aquifer systems. And, you don't want to start playing around. We see what fracking's done in all other areas in the world. And quite frankly, it's not something that I can get behind.
Okay, you're up against a pretty cagey veteran, Rick Perkins. What's your message to Rick?
Well, like I said,
Or I should say Rick supporters.
Rick supporters.
Yeah.
Like I said before the interview when we were discussing Todd, I feel like we have run a very clean and positive and energetic campaign. For myself, I feel like if and when I get in, that I want to be a true constituency MP, and that's someone who stays within the riding. I have very deep local roots here, and I feel like we have dealt with so much divisiveness within politics over the course of the last couple of years that we need someone to help try to reunite communities and bring people together. And I really feel like that's something that is very important to me. And it's something that I've also been hearing at the doorsteps in terms of, we need someone to be positive and work with all walks of life and all types of people. And I really feel that that is a quality that I possess. And it's a superpower that I can help take with me to and from Ottawa.
Okay, if people want to know more about you, you've got, like I said, a pretty good website. Direct people online where they can find out more about you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Todd. So the website is www.JessicaFancyLandry, all lowercase, no hashtags or anything, .com. So JessicaFancyLandry.com.
Okay, Jessica, good luck, and thank you so much for taking the time to come in. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Todd.
All right, take care. That's Jessica Fancy Landry, a Liberal candidate for South Shore St. Margaret's. When we come back, disinformation overload on the federal election campaign. We'll talk to an expert about this when we return. All right, I saw this story on the CTV website, disinformation overload on the federal election campaign. Joining us to talk about all of this is Anatoly Grutz, professor in Canada, research chair in privacy, preserving digital technologies, director of research, social media lab, Toronto Metropolitan University. Anatoly, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your valuable time.
Good morning.
All right, so first off, how do we define what disinformation is? How do we recognize it?
Well, I think the average Halahonian or social media user in Canada actually probably cannot tell whether something is disinformation because in addition to being false, misleading, out of context, we would also need to know that somebody actually intentionally shared it to mislead us. And so most of the time, when we see a claim online and we know it's false or misleading, we can say it's misinformation. But in terms of who's behind it, quite often we just don't know.
Yeah, for sure, and that's part of why it's so pervasive, I suppose, right? Because the people can get away with it.
Indeed, and it's so easy to share, and that's the whole point of the social media platforms. It's not a bug; it's a system to allow us to reshare things, so we don't know where it was originated, and by the time it gets to us, it maybe look like it's legit because it's coming from people you follow or connected somehow, so it adds that level of credibility when it might not be.
All right, tell us about deep fakes.
Yeah, well, the deep fakes, of course, many of us use ChatGPT type of technology, at least from the text generation perspective. So we can kind of appreciate the innovation and ability to quickly generate something that is looking very authentic in text-wise. Now, with deep fakes, it's a broader term. It usually refers to multimedia objects. It could be images, could be videos that are generated with AI. And so what happens, of course, as with most technology, it can be used for good and for bad. And when we say deep fakes, it usually implies that a bad actor used this AI technology to create something to fool you. And it looks like realistic, looks like one of our politicians say something that they're not supposed to say, or put our politicians in compromising positions in pictures. And pictures is not fake; it's fake because it's generated. So that's where the concept of deep fakes come in.
Okay, and utilizing deepfakes is something that's becoming more and more easy as technology becomes more and more available, right?
Yeah, it's as easy as typing search and keywords in the search engine, because think about it nowadays, if you go to Google or Bing, whatever your preferred search engine, when you type keywords, it actually uses generative AI nowadays to summarize the results. And because this technology is so pervasive and easy to use, now anybody can generate an image or video that is very real. So the question is, will they also misuse it to say that it actually happened online? And imagine if they also have, thousands of followers online, and they will share that with their own followers. So that's how this type of campaigns set up.
Tell us about shallow fakes.
Well, so shallow fakes actually quite effective. So they don't require necessarily, fancy and generative AI technology to run. It's as simple as, cutting a video into spots to take somebody's words out of context, or taking a picture and zooming in, or some, using basic Photoshop skills to put somebody in a different context. And because online usually we watched videos and images on small screens, the quality sometimes is not as important. So you won't necessarily notice that this is a very poor quality image. And with poor quality images, it's very easy to hide certain things or misinterpret certain things. So those are shallow fakes, essentially not requiring generative AI necessarily, but still getting that ability to deceive you. So, for example, we see some pictures from a debate last week, leaders' debate, where you have people zooming in on what kind of pin party leaders were wearing, and whether they had a Canadian flag on it or there was something else. So Carney was wearing the Order of Canada pin, and some people did not know what it is, and so that became it's a real picture, but out of context, it can become something that you can deceive people with.
All right, social media platforms, is this where most of the or most of these deep fakes or shallow fakes get disseminated?
That's where Canadians go to for entertainment as well as for news. And so that's, of course, the kind of natural delivery mechanism to get that content out there. Unfortunately, with the budget cuts, with the understaffed news outlets around the country, we are turning to influencers online, sadly, for our news. And as a result, it's easy to hide fakes, deep fakes and shallow fakes among the content that may be credible, but in some cases it's not. Sometimes it's partisan. Sometimes it's presented from both sides of the political spectrum, and so in that context, average Canadian can be for them it's quite difficult to understand the credibility of whatever they've seen online.
All right, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Anatoly. It's good information, and we'll talk again. Thank you.
All right, take care.
All right, take care. Anatoly Groots, Professor, Canada Research Chair in Privacy, Preserving Digital Technologies, Director of Research, Social Media Lab, Toronto Metropolitan University. All right, normally we take calls between 11 and 12 on Tuesday. We will take your calls, but before we get to calls, we wanted to cover the Pope's passing and what's next. None of Canada's 5 cardinals likely to be the next Pope. according to a Vatican expert. We'll chat with that expert when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, a Canadian cardinal was a top contender the last time a new pope was elected, but observers say that's unlikely to be the case this time around. Canada's 5 cardinals all have marks against them, ranging from advanced age to inexperience to allegations of sexual misconduct, according to Vatican experts. Joining us to discuss all of this is Mark McGowan, a professor of history at the University of St. Michael's College in Toronto. Professor McGowan, thanks for doing this. We appreciate your time.
Oh, good morning, Todd. Pleased to be here.
All right, so tell us about the Canadians that might are in the running or kind of percolate at the top of this list, if you will.
Sure. Okay, so maybe we will start with the Primate of Canada, who's Gerald Lacroix, who's the Archbishop of Quebec. So he's 67 years old. He's known as very affable, very pastoral, and the like. Not very well known outside of Canada, though he has served on the dicastery for divine worship, so liturgy, in Rome. So he is known in Rome. Problem is that he's been linked and accused of sexual misconduct, inappropriate touching in a class action suit that was launched against the Archdiocese of Quebec several years ago. And I suspect that no one will want to elect a pope with that kind of potential cloud over them. So, I would not think that for a number of reasons he'd be in the running. His colleague, who's former Archbishop of Quebec, was Marc Ouellette. Marc Ouellette was as you mentioned at the outset of this segment, he was one of the Canadians who was considered papabile or capable of being elected pope last time around. Well, he's 80 years old now, so considered a bit on the older side. He still could be elected, but he has no vote at age 80. And he, too, had, despite all of his experience running the Congregation of Bishops in Rome and being the Primate of Canada, he, too, has been named in this class action suit. Now, both Lacroix and Ouellette deny that the accusations made against them. There have been no formal charges. But again, you've got an older candidate who's probably his time passed the last time around when Francis was elected pope. So you've got those 2 French Canadians. Then you have another Montrealer, in this case actually born in Czechia, Michael Czerny. He's 78 years old, so still on the older side. But of all of the Canadian candidates, certainly one of the most engaged globally, very well known. He is in charge of the dicastery on human development, so social justice, development, the environment. He's multilingual, knowledgeable, but again, on the older side, and he's also a Jesuit. Now, Pope Francis, as Jorge Bergoglio, was also a Jesuit, member of the Society of Jesus, and I would think it's highly unlikely, both given his age and the fact that he's a Jesuit, that the Cardinals would elect back-to-back Jesuit candidates. They probably will look elsewhere. So who else does that leave? Well, ironically, 2 voting bishops who both have held the title of Archbishop of Toronto. So Frank Leo is the new Bishop of Toronto. He's 53 years old, and he's one of the youngest cardinals in the conclave. I suspect that his time is not yet to come. He's far too young. He does have international experience. He did work in the Vatican Diplomatic Corps. He was very well liked as a very short-term auxiliary bishop in Montreal, where he is originally from, part of the Italian community there. But certainly too inexperienced, too young. This is not his moment, which leaves the last of the 5, Todd. That's Thomas Collins, who retired as Archbishop of Toronto. He currently lives in Guelph. He's 78 years old, so he's on the older side. He has served in Rome as part of the Communications Commission in Rome and part of the Catholic Education Commission. But if the Cardinals are looking for someone who is going to bring some continuity with Francis's progressive, engaged pontificate, Collins won't be someone that they look to. Collins was certainly loyal to Pope Francis, but at the same time was part of a challenge in 2015, a challenge signed by 8 other bishops, mostly of a conservative ilk, that essentially challenged the meeting, the Synod of the Family, and the way in which it was crafted, and almost assuming that the answers coming out of the Synod were predetermined. So, in a sense, he's not been as close to Francis as many of the other cardinals. And you have to consider, Todd, too, that about 3/4 of these cardinals that will meet to vote will also be those who were handpicked by Francis himself. And of course, in choosing cardinals, he was very careful to make sure that these were pastoral men like himself, men who he would describe as being shepherds with the smell of their flock, that were really well grounded, were really engaged with their people, which meant in some ways, Todd, some of the old traditional cities that would normally have a cardinal didn't get one, but places such as Myanmar and Mongolia and East Timor, places that would never have imagined in a million years having a cardinal archbishop, they got cardinals under Francis. And so it's going to be a very global meeting of these cardinal electors. And I'm afraid that none of the 5 Canadians, at least from what I've said, would be able to sort of fill the bill for this new group that's meeting probably in early May.
Okay, so walk us through the process, the election process, if you will, please.
Okay, so normally the conclave will start 15 to 20 days after the death of the Pope. When a Pope dies, the seat of Peter is declared vacant. In Latin, sedes vacante. And so you have 9 days of mourning, and we are in that right now. The Pope's funeral will be on Saturday, and the cardinals will begin to gather probably about 2 weeks from yesterday. So, and this time gap gives them time to get to Rome. As I said, they're a global bunch, so they'll be coming from all over the earth. They'll get to Rome, and many of them don't know each other very well. They may have met once if they were, consecrated or brought into the college in the same class, so to speak. But many of them don't know each other. This will give them time to sort of discuss, to pray, to meet, and get a sense of what the priorities of the church are at this point. And then they will go into conclave. It will be locked down. In the interim, the person who's really in charge of the Vatican affairs is someone called the Camerlengo, or the Chamberlain, and that currently is an Irish cardinal, Farrell. So they will meet in the Sistine Chapel. They are sworn to secrecy as to how those proceedings go. And then they will vote. They will handwrite votes. In our own time, these votes have not taken long, not generally more than 2 days. They vote on the first day. There's usually 2 ballots in the morning, 2 ballots in the afternoon on the second day, and so it goes until a pope is elected with a 2/3 majority. Now, interesting, even though they're sworn to secrecy, somehow we do find out, who the various factions are after the fact, and we can well imagine that there will be individuals that are sort of top of mind of many of the guys going in to the conclave. So, although the old Roman adage is, he who enters the conclave a pope normally ends up leaving the conclave a cardinal. So, all bets are off, and as Catholics would say, the Holy Spirit is full of surprises. So.
Okay, so do popes or do cardinals advocate for themselves, or are there speeches? Like, what's the process here?
Okay, so yeah, and actually, it's a really good question, Todd, because I think most of that sort of posturing for those who want it, most of the cardinals don't want it, but there will be ambitious ones. If you saw the film Conclave, John Lithgow played a francophone cardinal who was lobbying about, and I'm sure that happens. But once you're in the conclave, there are discussions. Normally, those are during breaks and the like, and they go to the conclave to vote. And already there are talks about who would be a likely successor, and in fact, if you start looking at the betting sites online, you can even in a very crass way lay money down on your favored candidate. I mean, it's so. I mean, I'm happy to discuss some of those with you, Todd, if you wish. So,
sure, please do so.
Yeah. So, there are a number of bishops that certainly Francis held in high favor. One of them is a Filipino bishop, Luis Tagla. He's 67, so he's in the right age. He was in the dicastery of evangelization. He's young. He's dynamic. He's multilingual. He's a kind of pastor that really was close to Francis's heart. And he comes from Asia, and that's a growing region of the church, particularly a huge Catholic population in the Philippines. If it's a European, some are looking to Pietro Parolin, Secretary of State, so he would be the second in charge under Francis before Francis's death. He's about 70, and that also is sort of in the age range. He's well known internationally. He's the one that Francis would send to, how shall we say, diplomatic hotspots, Ukraine, Africa, you name it. So Parolin, if it's a European, would be high on the list. If you were looking to Africa, Todd, you'd probably want to look at Peter Turkson, who is from Ghana. He was very instrumental in helping Francis prepare some of his social encyclicals. So Turkson, very very conscious of social justice needs in the world, and certainly one who would be of Francis's ilk. Now, there are a couple of outsiders that I'm very curious about. One is Tarcisio Kikuchi, who's from Japan. He's 68, and he's been in charge of the Caritas International, which is a global Catholic charitable organization. And he also served for a time in Ghana, so he's well known internationally, and it would be a real surprise to see a Japanese cardinal elected pope. There's one more, Jaime Spengler. He's 64 and he's from Brazil, but again, a pastoral individual who there was a synod on the church in the Amazon region of Brazil and adjoining countries in Latin America, and Spengler was front and center in that and began to adopt many of the principles expressed in that synod within his own diocese. I mean, I think he would be an outsider, but it would be interesting. He is a South American, and those would be some of the names that might come up. But I think Tagla and Parolin are the kind of I think they're first and foremost in a lot of people's minds right now.
Okay, lastly, and we're just about out of time, but why do you think that this garners so much attention globally from Catholics and non-Catholics alike?
Okay, I mean, it's a very good question, Todd, because, I mean, Catholics constitute about 1 billion people on the planet, so a significant number of the inhabitants of this globe are Catholic. And the Pope, of course, being the head of the Roman Catholic Church and at least 21 Eastern churches, has a tremendous moral sway in many parts of the world. And I think Francis, in this particular case, just had a pastoral attitude of mercy and compassion. His pleas for migrants and refugees, his letters on our common home, the planet Earth, appealed well beyond the Catholic Church to environmentalists, to social justice advocates, to civil rights workers. He just had this electric vibe about him, if I could say, that was very infectious. And of course, he did things that many thought would not be possible for a pope. And I think in the Canadian context, Todd, definitely his what he called his penitential pilgrimage here in 2022 to address the issue of Indigenous residential schools, the Catholic Church's role in them, and to formally apologize on Indigenous territory to the many Indigenous peoples who were traumatized by these experiences. He was certainly a remarkable individual, and I think that's why we're paying, considerable attention to him and his possible successor right now.
Mark, fascinating chat. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much, and let's talk again.
Okay, always love to be in Halifax. Bye now.
Okay, all right, take care. Mark McGowan, Professor of History at the University of St. Michael's College in Toronto. Now we get some time for you. What is on your mind? The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. What would you like to get into today? Obviously, the news of the day and of the week and of the month, and one of the biggest news stories, probably and likely of the year, will be the passing of Pope Francis. His funeral is set for Saturday at 10 a.m. in St. Peter's Square. What are your thoughts on all of this? Too much attention given to this as the global world news descends on Italy for this, including CBC, CTV, Global News, all the news networks will be there en masse. What are your thoughts on this, folks? Because this is going to be dominating the news cycle in a pretty big time way over the next number of weeks until a new pope is selected. Do you believe the Pope represents God on earth? Do you believe that the Pope communes directly with God? Because that is the fundamental core belief I do believe that Catholics hold, that he is in tune with God and communes directly with God in some way. Do you believe that? What are your thoughts on the Catholic Church in general? And why do you feel as though this again garners so much attention despite the scandals that have plagued the Catholic Church for decades now, and centuries actually, but have come to light over the last number of decades? So what are your thoughts on all of this? How are you mourning the Pope's passing? Are you upset by it? Are you indifferent to it? Of course, we've got a federal election next on the 28th, on Monday, and the race to form the next government is now tighter than ever as the federal election campaign enters its final week. A new poll suggests the latest Ipsos poll conducted exclusively for Global News found the Liberals are still in the lead, but now just 3 points ahead of the Conservatives, who continue to gain momentum in the home stretch. The results of the poll conducted after last week's televised leaders' debate show 41% of surveyed Canadians would vote for the Liberals, down 1 point from last week, while 38% said they would choose the Conservatives, who gained 2 points. Are you decided? Are you undecided? Do you believe these polls? What do you think the ballot box question is? Perhaps you might want to talk about things happening locally as well. Give us a call, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Bill's giving us a buzz. Hello, Bill.
Hi, how you doing? The church thing. Actually, I wanted to talk about the old Veterans Library, but you're talking about the church. My take on the churches is this. Regardless if they're good, bad, or whatever they are certainly keeping a lot of people on the right path. I don't know about the right path, but keeping them good. because they go to church and they believe in it. And so, I leave it at that. The other thing I want to talk about mainly is the old Veterans Library down there on Spring Garden Road.
Yeah.
What I'm afraid is the city's going to up, and I'm not sure yet who's really in control of it, the city or the province, but the thing is that they're talking maybe going to tear it down. There should be some action here from the legions or the veterans or something more than they are. They're kind of sleeping on this one. I mean, that's a memorial library, a memorial veterans.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll tell you, I'm thinking very seriously myself to talk to them about putting an offer in to rent that place. And what I'm thinking about is my auction business and a big place for buy and sell all the little tables of goods and so on. I'm thinking seriously to go down there and make an offer, check it out, and go on. I'd like to see somebody else come alive, some other companies or other associations. What do you think?
Well, I think that's interesting. I'm not sure whether or not how much work that you'd have to put into it. I would think that.
I don't know.
I would think it would be extensive work that would be required in order to make it a viable option for you. Would it not?
Well, I'll tell you, more than likely, the one main thing that usually happens, and it happens at the library over there in Dartmouth, the mold on the shiprock paneling. Now, that's not a major thing. I mean, you can replace the panels. That's to start with. You could put some fumigators in there and really blast the place with all the stuff that would kill the whatever. I don't know what else is in there that's so bad that you couldn't. Certainly the facade and the grounds, and it ain't all the windows smashed out. It's certainly, I think, a viable thing. I think there's a story there. I'm firmly convinced that there's something behind that, why that place is not going the way it should go. I leave that with your customers to think. I think I've got the answer why this building is not being utilized and they want it down.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, I really don't. I think it's because it's old and it's you think there's something more to it, do you?
Yes, there's something there. I'm pretty sure I see it in other areas there, and I think there's a problem there without getting into it. It's kind of a touchy problem, but I think I get the answer why. It's why they just want it down.
Okay, you want to share that with you want to share that with us publicly, Bill, or no?
That's a touchy subject, but I'll see how sharp your audience is. See if they can come up with why. Really, that's not being used, and why it's left to go the way it is, why it's not being rented out or sold or something, rather than tear it down. You check the gang there and see what they
Okay, Bill.
what they say.
Thanks for the call, pal.
Thank you.
Take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
The Todd Veinotte Show
on 95.7 News Radio, Halifax.
All right, taking your calls. The way to reach us 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Couple of emails. Then back to the phones. This one from Colin says, we have an election days away. We have an existential threat next door with Trump. The markets are crashing and on. So why are we even wasting a second of airtime on a dead old man in Italy? There's more important things to talk about. This from Phil says, why are we wasting time listening to who is going to be the next person to talk to a ghost in the sky? Way too much attention given to this idiocy. Can look forward to you covering the election of any new heads of Scientology, the Mormons, or Islam. And look, I'm not going to disagree with what you're saying and your sentiments to either of those sending me those emails, because I quite honestly feel the same way. That said, though, I try and gauge what people want to talk about and the importance of stories, and this is globally impactful. People are talking about it, but look, I'm not going to disagree with your sentiment. I guess I feel out of a sense of responsibility, I guess, an obligation to cover the Pope and to talk about the passing of the Pope but I look, if I had my druthers, I'd not talk about it at all because I agree with the sentiments written in both those emails. That said, though, I try and gauge things and gauge people's expectations of the show, and I feel as though because it is such a huge international story that I have some responsibility to cover it on the talk show. I have reached out to the Archbishop here in Nova Scotia as well, and perhaps we'll have a chat with him. He's responded, and we're going to coordinate something. So, look, I get what you're saying. I do. And what are your thoughts on this, folks? Do you think that there's far too much attention right now, given all of the global events happening, all of the issues happening? Why are we diverting so much attention to the passing of the Pope and the election of the next Pope? I find it fascinating that the global media descends on Rome for this. But anyway, what's your take on this? You can talk about, of course, the federal election or whatever else you'd like to get into. It is your time. It is an open hour. 902-405-6000. Ann's giving us a call. Hello, Ann.
It all because I'm really, really worried about this Mark Carney. He's got his, he put his Brookfield, he put that in the States, New York. He put his money off in the Caribbean. He's a member of the World WEF, and they're talking about that. But he wants us to join the European Union, and he wants us to join the Coalition of the Willing to fight in Ukraine. Now, the Coalition of the Willing is just England, France, Germany, and the 3 Baltic states. The other European countries said we're having nothing to do with it. And so, anyway, I'm really worried about him. He's got 3, what do you call those? He's a British citizen, an Irish citizen, and a Canadian citizen. I think you should just have one citizenship. I don't think there should be dual or triple or whatever else. But I'm really worried about this because all the young people will be packed off and sent over to Europe, sent over to Ukraine because Zelensky is running out of soldiers. And I'm really worried about him joining Europe. And Trudeau's over there, too. He's Trudeau number 2. He's exactly like Trudeau, except he's suave. I mean, Trudeau is young and inexperienced, and this man is very well experienced, and he's right into, he's an oligarch. He's a very, very elite person, and he wouldn't even speak to the fishermen in Newfoundland because he just thought they were beneath him. So I'm really worried about this person, and he just came overnight, and it's a rush election. We should let it go on till we know more about him. But this is a real rush. It started off with this joke because Trump couldn't stand Trudeau, and it started off as a joke, the 51st state, and then Trump kept on, he shouldn't have kept poking at Trudeau with this. And then so Carney and Trudeau said, this is a good thing, we can use this. We'll have us, Carney, against Trump, and that's what the election is being run on, Carney against Trump. I was talking to some old people in the area, and they thought they're going to vote for Carney because they didn't want Trump to be. And I said, no, it's Carney against the Polyev. Trump's got nothing to do with it. He's not even Canadian.
Sounds to me, Ann, like you feel very threatened and very worried and very concerned that the Conservatives can't win this thing.
No, I'm very concerned that if Carney wins, we're going to be over in war. That's what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about anything else. And the Conservatives already said that they're supporting, but they didn't say that they were going to join the Coalition of the Willing, which Carney already did before he was even Prime Minister. That's what I'm worried about. And I think everybody should be worried about that. And they should be worried about the young people in this country.
Don't you have any faith in
young people?
Do you not have any faith in the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre and his leadership?
Oh, I do. I think he'd make a very good leader. But it's like Carney just came out of the blue from somewhere. He's been advising Trudeau all these years, don't forget. He's been advising Trudeau on the carbon tax, on the immigration, everything. I wouldn't be surprised if he took over from Schwab. Schwab just came down from the leader of the WEF, World Economic Forum. And they've been really running the world. They're globalists. Carney's a globalist. Trudeau's a globalist.
Okay.
I think we need somebody that's from the country, and Polyev is from the country, and that's what I'd like to have somebody that's really from the country.
Thanks for the call. The whole World Economic Forum fear-mongering tactic, it doesn't work, folks, okay? For those people I shouldn't say fear-mongering. I'm not suggesting that Carney's not a member of the World Economic Forum and the Liberals haven't and Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland and all, but that information is no longer working as far as I'm concerned. You're not convincing anybody to vote Conservative because of that anymore. That information has been out there, and at some point it comes across as simply fear-mongering. And it's just not working. And change the dial. 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Mike, hello.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi. Yeah, I want to talk about, I heard that the Liberals have a plan, they want to tax your home equity. Have you heard anything about this, and is it still on the table, or is it? I haven't heard that it's not off the table. So
well, look again. This is another one. This is another Justin Trudeau. I don't know the complete history on this home equity thing, but apparently Justin Trudeau was at a meeting in which this idea was floated months, if not years ago, and suddenly the message is that the Liberals are going to charge you equity tax if you sell your primary home. From what I know, from what I can gather, and from what I know, that is not on the table. That's never been floated officially by anybody, certainly not Mark Carney. So, again, I would put that into the category of misinformation at this point.
Well, I looked it up this morning, and it's still on there. It doesn't say it hasn't been taken off the table.
On there? You looked it up where? Where did you look it up?
I looked it on Google. I Googled it on Google this morning.
Okay, well, Googling it doesn't mean that it's on the table.
It didn't say it was off the table, my point is. That's why I'm calling you.
Well, okay, all I'm saying is that since Mark Carney has not campaigned on it, is how I would put it.
Of course he's not going to campaign on it. But you know how much money they'll make on that if they do it? Trillions of dollars. There's like $4.something trillion of property value in Canada. The homeowners, right, that own their own homes.
Yeah.
Now there'd be a big lot of money for these Liberals to spend.
Yeah, I don't think that. I think that would be the biggest mistake any politician in Canada would ever make, and I don't have any concern over it as a property owner.
Well, I do, and I think a lot of people shouldn't. If it's not on the table and people are talking about it, why aren't they categorically denying it? I haven't heard one Liberal say, "No, we're not talking about that." They did talk about it. So it's on their agenda somewhere.
You say some policy group talked about it. It wasn't the Liberal Party talking about it, to my knowledge. Anyway, listen, Mike, I wouldn't worry I wouldn't worry about it if I were you. That's all I can say. You can take that for what it is.
All right, okay, thank you. Have a great day.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Hello, Sean.
Hey, Todd, how are you?
I'm well, you?
Good. Congrats on your life sentence there, by the way. I haven't talked to you since.
Life sentence.
I got to face the judge and jury myself in the coming future, so maybe I'll see you on the inside.
There you go.
Todd, I'm just wondering if you could have Frankie Terrazzano on to talk about this Liberal platform that was released over the weekend. I thought Carney was an economist, and now he's talking about doubling the debt, but he's using that famous line that, remember, all Liberals, Freeland and Trudeau used to use of, we're investing in Canadians. This is Canadian. Where did that get us?
Well, doubling the debt, that is something that is questionable, whether the debt is being doubled. I think that's over a number of years that spending is going to be rolled out on, right?
Yeah, but I really think you should have Frankie on. I mean, you've had him on for many other things.
Yeah.
I follow him on Twitter, and he has some really interesting things that he's been posting about.
Yeah.
And it's scary, and I think you should have him on here to talk about it, because I find it ironic that all this was released over the weekend. We had the debate Thursday night. There hasn't been any coverage of it. Nowhere. You haven't covered it. Even Rob hasn't really touched it. The media hasn't touched it. Carney got handed handed to them in the debate many times. Now we got this budget being pushed out. They pushed it out. Now they're accusing Pierre Poilievre of not releasing it, which is coming out today, which is irrelevant. But this guy is just lying through his teeth. He had the audacity to come to PEI and say yesterday that Trump is the biggest crisis we have faced. Like, where was he during COVID, Todd? Was that not that's one of the biggest economical crises I've ever lived through in my life.
Well,
Trump 25% tariff.
Currently, Trump, it would be, in my opinion, I think he's accurate. I think he's a wild card, and as long as Trump's in the White House, you never know what's going to happen day to day. I think that's a huge existential threat still to this country. I do believe that.
Like, we're talking a 25% tariff on what? Vehicles, cars, manufacturing.
That's
right?
For now. That can change in 5 minutes.
Okay, but we can't do that because we could do that both ways. Just like the person that just called about the taxing on the properties, properties,
yeah.
right? So we can do that all day long. But the where, here, and now is the 25% tariffs. We're what? How many days into this? A month? Almost. And has anything changed in your life? Have you in a crisis?
Well, if you were working in Ontario and working in job plants, then your life would have changed because plants have shut down. Yes, they have.
Big time. In Ontario.
Yeah.
In Ontario. You're right. Now, what about the 25% tariffs that China put on our fishing industry here in Nova Scotia? No one seems to be concerned about that. I work with the lobster fishermen. And they are they don't understand why no one's talking about it. They're seriously worried about this. We have 100% tariff put on our canola export out of Saskatchewan. That's going to cripple that industry.
Yeah.
No one's talking about it. We have a 25% tariff put on our pork from China. No one's talking about it. We have a Chinese putting hits on Canadian citizens for speaking their mind, and nothing. We have China interfering in our elections, 2 of them, mind you, and we don't even know about this one yet. China. And Donald Trump and his 25% tariffs, and this is what Mark Carney's making this election out?
Well, it's obviously resonating with Canadians. It looks like it's resonating with Canadians, doesn't it?
With boomers, 100%. I don't speak to anybody in my age category that even speaks about Trump when you ask about it.
Okay.
But you go to the boomers, and they're worried, sick, orange man bad.
Okay.
But if
Sean,
they sat and realized about the Chinese, and how on the debate, Mark Carney was asked.
Okay, Sean. Listen, I'm up against the break. I'm up against the break, Sean. But we will know shortly. We will know Election Day how this all goes down, won't we?
Yes, but can you just say that, when Carney was asked the question at the debate, what is the biggest threat to Canada? What was his answer?
I know what his answer was.
It was China. It was China, not Trump. So why is it now back to the debate's over, and Monday it's back to Trump? What happened to Thursday with being China? This guy is a liar, and we'll see.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Thank you.
The mainstream poll.
Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls. The way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Jim. Hello, Jim.
Hi. Good morning. You've done a good job of trying to inject a little neutral information into some of the disinformation coming in from recent callers. We're into the final week of the campaign. I have a humble suggestion. Maybe have an hour or maybe even 2 sometime this week, the few days remaining, to get Laurie Turnbull or someone smart and objective in and let people call in and float their conspiracy theories, and then she could counter them with factual information, or again, not necessarily her, but you know what I mean? Yeah. Because it's just a little out of control, and people get airtime to float these crazy theories, and then you ask, where did you get it from? Well, Google, but that's not good enough, obviously.
Yeah.
Anyway, just a thought, because we're into the final week. It's showtime, and people are making up their minds, and maybe not everybody is a political junkie, and they'd like to hear from someone. You're doing a good job. I'm not criticizing you.
Oh, that's fine.
But you know what I mean? Like, just someone who can provide some real information about whether the World Economic Forum controls the world, or, whatever.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Fair enough, Jim. Thanks, pal. Appreciate the call.
Great.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Kathleen, hello.
Hello.
Hi there.
Thanks for taking my call, Todd.
Sure.
I just wanted to say a little bit about the Pope. I'm glad you have been talking about the Pope. It's respectful. When you look at what he did and stood for, whether he stood for equality, equity on the world stage, and everybody and everything mattered to him, no matter where you came from or what you did. Everybody mattered. And no matter what your status, you were important to him. And I think it's important that we listen to what you have to say and listen to what other people have to say. And thanks for listening.
Okay, thanks, Kathleen. Appreciate the call. Take care.
Okay.
All right. Listen, and again, when it comes to Pope Francis, by most accounts, obviously nobody's perfect, but by most accounts, he was a pretty progressive guy and opened up the door to LGBTQ rights. And he came from a very humble background, and again, from all accounts, a pretty decent human being. Now, again, as I chatted with Mark McGowan earlier in the show, professor of history at the University of St. Michael's College in Toronto, about the next pope and the next process, and that is fascinating to a lot of people. It is. Not to everybody, but to many of you listening out there, it's of interest. I would liken it to the royal family in a way, like when the Queen died. People are fascinated, despite the checkered history and despite the controversial past, with the family and all that goes with it. All right, James wants to give us a quick comment. James, go ahead.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for taking my call. I missed your show having a historian, and there was a local historian. I think that would the folks listening would be interested in our history.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks for the call, pal. Appreciate it. Blair Beat, I believe he was referring to, and we should have Blair back on the show. Absolutely. Rick talked to Blair a lot, and I will make an effort to do so more often. So thanks for that. The Science Files when we come back. All right, it's the Science Files with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University astrophysicist. Give us a call if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker. The way to reach us, 902-405-6000. That is the way to get in on the fun. Again, 902-405-6000. If you've got a science-related question or theme or inquiry, Rob Thacker will do his best to help address it. Rob Thacker, hello.
Hello again.
What's going on? I guess we may be golfing soon, I hear.
Well, maybe. We'll see. We'll see. What's going on? It's exam time.
Yeah.
Which is always stressful. I shouldn't joke. It is stressful. So I've managed to mark all my exams, and pretty much everyone in the class who was able to make the exams and everything did quite well. So it was a really good class.
Oh, cool. So when's the academic season end?
Fairly soon. I think exam schedule finishes at the end of this week, if I remember correctly. And so you have to have your results in within a week of your exam being set. Mm-hmm. So it'll be done pretty soon. And then we have a short break, and then we start basically the summer terms, or spring terms, then our summer term.
Yeah. And of course, those who are getting their masters have to. That's a whole other process,
yeah,
right?
So if you're doing a master's degree, a graduate degree of any kind, then once the autumn and winter sessions have finished, then you're going into summer. And so very often for anyone who's doing a thesis or something like that, they'll have their defense coming up if they're getting ready for the defense over the summer. So basically, what people may not be aware of is like once you've done sort of like those two big teaching blocks of the fall and the winter terms, then we do have some teaching going on over the summer, but it's less. Most of the time, this is when all of the research happens. Now, I don't want to say there isn't research happening. Other times there is, but you have freer time in your schedule. You've still got administrative stuff to do, but you have more time to devote to doing your research over the summer.
Mm-hmm. Right, what's that mean, defense? I often heard that term. I've never got a graduate degree.
Oh, okay, sure.
I don't know what exactly is involved.
So literally, you've written a thesis, right? And that thesis has some statements about some topic of some kind, whether you're in arts, science, whatever. It's the same. And so what you will then have is a group of people who are the examiners. They'll read the thesis and they will literally ask you questions. I won't necessarily say they'll try to poke holes, right? That's not constructive, but they will sort of like try to constructively test, make sure you did the work, make sure the conclusions that you've come to are actually based in the evidence that you have within your thesis, and so on. And so it can be quite grueling. Every now and again, you get theses that are just spectacular, and students have done amazing work. And those are quite funny because quite often people don't have particularly good questions because it's just so good, right? But most of the time, there's a fair number of questions that the student sort of goes through. While I have been to defenses where students have failed, it's very, very rare because most of the time, you don't want a student going into a defense who really doesn't have a good idea of what's in their thesis because they wrote it, right? And if there's problems with it, then the supervisors are going to say, we've got to fix those problems before you defend it.
Fair enough. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. David's giving us a call. Hello, David.
David Paul?
David. Is it David?
Well, it's David Paul, technically.
It's Tim and Paul?
David Paul.
Oh, David Paul.
Almost like the Pope.
I see. David Paul. Okay, David Paul. Sorry. Go ahead, David.
Almost did too, so it's perfect. Just joking. So listen, you guys aren't allowed to play the theme song anymore because of rights and stuff, right?
That's correct.
That's correct. I was very disappointed.
Yeah.
But Rob can play the guitar, and you guys can sing. So why don't you just rig it with the song? Right? Do it live.
All right, maybe next week. Maybe next week.
On.
Maybe we'll work on
come
it.
On, just do it once for me. Do it once for me.
We still have to pay rights to do that anyway.
I know you probably need about a month's practice. Or so.
We'd have to pay the cost for doing a cover.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
listen every day, so I look forward to one day you guys are going to come on and just do it. You're going to say, Dr. Robert. Okay, anyways,
well,
legitimate question for you.
Okay.
Okay, so you know how X-rays can pass right through the body?
X-rays?
No, this is just my first example. Things can pass straight through your body.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, is this like particles, or can you explain anything to me about that? And I'll just shut up and listen.
Okay, sure. I mean,
what can pass straight through the body? Like just go through one side or the other.
Yep. So the best example I can give you is something called the neutrino, right? And that's a subatomic particle.
I heard that.
And that goes through everything. And the reason why it goes through everything is what we call the reaction cross-section for that, to have an interaction with the nucleus of atom, because that's the thing it's got to interact with. It's really, really tiny, right? So literally it will go through the whole way through the Earth and not interact with anything, right? And so if you want to detect it, you have to have massive detectors. And so we did this in Canada with Heavy Water Snow Lab. And then there is a finite probability that it will have an interaction. And you just sit there and you wait, right? And you wait to see.
Okay, so just to sort of intervene for a second. What is an X-ray? Like what's going through my body?
Okay, so when you're having an X-ray, X-rays are what's called part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So you can think of them as being like high energy light, the same way that light is high energy radio waves. There's a whole continuum.
Are these like waves, or like are they like atoms?
All right, David, you got to give Rob at least 15 seconds to respond.
Okay, so it can be interpreted as both a wave of electric and magnetic energy or a particle with associated electric and magnetic energies to it as well. So this is called the wave-particle duality quantum theory, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so yes, it's essentially a wave that's going to go through you, and there is a probability it will interact with something. And in fact, most of the time, X-rays do interact with something in the body. That's how we are able to take X-ray images. Right, so X-rays is an example of something that it kind of goes through. It's going to have an interaction, and the lower the density of stuff that's getting through, the more dense we know the material that it's going through is.
I'm much more more informed now.
Okay. Thanks,
and
Mel.
this is way better than Google.
Okay, thanks, bud. Take care. 902-405-6000. That's what we strive for, to be better than Google.
I'll take that.
How about the Science Files with Rob Thacker? Way better than Google. What do you think of that for a catchphrase?
That's a good catchphrase, but sometimes it's going to be hard to live up to.
That's right. Alexander, hello.
Hi, good afternoon, gentlemen. Hard act to follow, but I get two questions for you, if I may.
Sure.
Dr. Thacker, the launch, I believe it last week, of the Blue Origin. Any scientific value, or is it just space tourism, or what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's you got to be honest and say that New Shepard launches are primarily space tourism. There's no getting away from that. I mean, that's not to say there aren't some things you can do with sounding rockets, just firing things up and leaving them up there just for a little bit and doing stuff. But as far as I know, there's not really anything scientific being done on Blue Origin New Shepard launches at the moment, but there could be.
No, that was I was wondering if they actually hadn't put any scientific experiments on them at all, but I guess it's just take them up and bring them back, is it?
If they have, they're keeping it very quiet, right? So
okay. Yeah. My second question was I just was reading an article about how scientists had cooled some object down to almost absolute zero, and they were saying it's equivalent to the temperature of space. Is the temperature of space absolute zero?
Ooh, well, it's not quite absolute zero. It's a couple of degrees above that, and that's because of the background cosmic microwave background radiation, right? So it's not quite there, but it's very close, right? So.
And is that universal? Is that absolute zero throughout the universe?
Yeah, that's everywhere, because you can think of the Big Bang happened everywhere at the same time. Right, and that means that the cosmic microwave background is all throughout space, flooding everywhere you go. You have the same kind of cosmic microwave background field.
And so, when would it change? When you get into a planet's atmosphere, that's the only time it starts to change. Something of that has a shield against it.
Well, sure. I mean, it's electromagnetic radiation, so anything that's capable of blocking microwaves is going to block the cosmic microwave background, but. It's not very strong, right? I mean, it's weaker in most cases than terrestrial radio waves for TV and things like that. And
finally, do we subject things that we send into orbit to absolute zero as a test? Do we have that ability?
Ooh, so NASA has big testing chambers, vacuum testing chambers, and they will cool things down. But what you've got to remember is the sun. Means that basically if you're not in a shadow, right, then you're actually going to be quite warm because the sun is going to be heating things. And so one of the big challenges with designing spacecraft is literally being able to cope with changes in temperature as you go from light to shade. Right, so they have a big vacuum chamber that they'll use to test the vehicles, and it can do some cryogenics and some freezing, but I don't know how low it can go. I wouldn't think it can go like super low, like -200 or anything like that, but it probably can do like -50, I would guess.
Okay, great. I appreciate your time as always. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Take care. 902-405-6000. Science Files continues when we come back. All right, it's the Science Files with Dr. Rob Thacker, astrophysicist from St. Mary's University. Give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for the Science Files with Rob Thacker. Carl's giving us the buzz. Hello, Carl.
Hey, how you doing, guys?
Doing well.
Dr. Rob there, I was just wondering about gravity. Does gravity change over time, or has it ever changed, like millions, hundreds of millions of years ago, the animals got huge and everything? There's a chance that the gravity was less intense back then?
Okay, sure. So Actually, no, but I want to give a longer answer than that. So we actually do try to see whether gravity is changing, and we can only do it indirectly, right? And so we can look, obviously, very, very far away, look at very distant galaxies. You're looking back in time. So that's what we do. We actually look for something called the fine structure constant. But anyway, we try and do that and use that. And that will tell us something about what's changing with the fundamental constants of the universe. And the long and the short of it is we've got really hardly any evidence for any changes in gravity at all. And in a way, that's a good thing, right? Because if gravity was changing from place to place, then physics would be like stamp collecting. You'd have one set of rules here, one set of rules there, and it would really be difficult to keep track of everything. So we're thankful that there's really not any evidence for that. And now, in terms of the animals getting really big, that's actually evolutionary adaptation to what you're living in. So if you have enormous resources of vegetation that you can eat, then there will be a possibility for creatures to be able to grow particularly large. And at the same time, there's a lot of evidence that the oxygen in the atmosphere of the Earth was much higher in the past. And so insects in particular got much bigger, right, because of that increased oxygen.
Right on. Thank you. One more thing, Doctor. There's a theory that the core of the Earth is slowing down and may even stop and spin the other way or whatever. If that happens, or when that happens, will that affect the northern lights? Will they be visible further south?
Yeah, so that's related to the actual dynamo, not necessarily the core itself. It's related to currents in the core and how those can flip. And so, yes, if that happened, then potentially we would see changes in terms of the northern light because the magnetic field structure that those currents produce would actually change. Now, if between one flip going all the way to the bottom from the top and so on, then actually it would be fairly similar, right? Because you'd still have that concentration of magnetic field lines over the poles. But while it's flipping, yeah, that would be a bit different because then you wouldn't have the same concentration at the poles.
So can we assume from that it may be flipping right now because the northern lights are definitely getting more visible further south?
So yeah, that's very true. And what we saw last October was something else. I have to say that's one of the amazing experiences of my life, being able to see a big red aurora in Halifax. But that's largely down to changes both in the activity of the sun and, believe it or not, a puffing up of the Earth's atmosphere that coincided, right? And so that puffing up of the Earth's atmosphere, they put a bunch of oxygen atoms much higher up than normal. And then this huge amount of energy coming from the sun was able to energize those and create these states that actually were just glowing this vibrant red, right? So that was kind of like a bunch of things coming together at the same time.
Right on. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Carl. Appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. James, hello.
Hi. Climate change. This is maybe a combination of politics and science, but Canada obviously is not the largest emitter in the world. On the other hand, if nobody acts, then we're all in trouble.
Yeah.
So given that it's a bit of an issue in the election, how important is it for Canada to try to be a leader in reducing emissions as opposed to a follower and say, well, until China does something, we don't matter?
Well, look, I'm a scientist, so I've obviously got viewpoints on this. But from the political perspective, I mean, everyone's going to have their own personal opinion, right? We can't get away from that. But here's the thing with climate change. It's one of those situations where inevitably emissions are tilted towards developed countries, right, on a per capita basis. And so when you think about the responsibility for what's being created, very often high populations in undeveloped countries don't actually have particularly high emissions. And so there is a direct responsibility associated with developed countries around climate change. There's not really any getting away from that. It's just a fact. And so in that situation, you need the developed countries. And I'll just, whether it's through Paris Accords, whether it's through G8, whatever, right? They do have to work together, right? And I'm not a big believer in just turning around and measuring things by the size of the country. I don't think that helps. Because for the same reason, if you look at the actual emissions across different sectors, you've got to pretty much cover every sector. You can't just sort of say, okay, we'll fix aircraft or we'll fix traffic or whatever. You have to do all of these things. And that's what makes it difficult, right? Because everyone has some kind of vested interest in one particular sector or another. And so different countries, obviously, as we're seeing right now, will play a protectionist game, right? But the fact of the matter is, if we don't get this sorted out, right, we're leaving a less and less hospitable place for our kids.
Very informative. Thank you. I wanted to get your opinion, your perspective. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, James. 902-405-6000. Scott, hello.
Hi. I was wondering if I speak to Dr. Rob.
Sure, go ahead.
Dr. Rob, last night around, I don't know, it was maybe before 5 or something, I noticed what I thought was a passenger jet going overhead.
Okay, not unusual,
but
given where we are.
No, that's true. I see them all the times.
Yep.
But this thing kept going straight up and not like going overhead. Went way, way up, and then it made a big arc and then went over my house and disappeared over the horizon. And I've just wondered if anybody saw that last night.
Okay. Here's what I'm going to guess may have happened, and you can disagree, but here's my best guess at what's going on. So when you look at a plane from a low viewing angle, you can be in the kind of position such that it will look like it's going up. The same way, if you look at a plane that's gone far away from you and is going past, it can look like it's going down more. Right? And that's just an effect of your viewing angle, because you'll see the motion associated with it going across in terms of east to west. And from your perspective, that will kind of end up looking like it's going down as it goes down with the curvature of the Earth.
Okay, I get that explanation, but I've never seen anything like this before, so I don't know.
I would have liked to have seen it with you. Then we could have had a good discussion about it.
And it actually, it had pulsating smoke coming out of it, if you know what I mean, right? It wasn't a steady, like exhaust smoke, right?
Normally when you're seeing anything coming off the back of a jet, that's a contrail, and so most of the time those are going to be fairly stable, right? Because it's a product of what's happening in the atmosphere as well as the jet going through it. That's the key thing to remember.
Right on. Okay, Dr. Rob, appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank
Scott.
you.
Appreciate it. Take care. 902-405-6000. If you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker, give us a call. 902-405-6000. We got Rob Thacker to the top of the hour again. 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, the Science Files continues with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University astrophysicist. Give us a call at 902-405-6000 if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker. 902-405-6000. Kevin's giving us a call. Hello, Kevin.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Last week I called in and I asked a question about how confident we could be in artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And you said not really that, especially with math.
Well, it's very dependent. It makes mistakes, right?
Yeah. I went on 2 different ones on the internet and gave them both the same 8-figure math problem, and they both got it wrong, like 6 times.
Yeah.
I had to explain it to them and that. So it really surprised me.
I've got to ask you the details, though, because the details really matter. What kind of math problem was it?
Just basic, 480 times 79, then add a number and stuff like that.
Yep, sure.
Nothing major. So the reason why I'm calling is I was working on a project, and it's got to do with hydrogen cracking off. And so I'm working with some pretty hefty numbers, right?
Yeah.
And it just blew that right out the water once I got into mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Because I like the environment
is an issue, and the sooner we can clean it up
Yeah.
or do something about it.
So I can make some suggestions for you, right? Like
Yeah.
one of the things you can do with an AI model is force it to put stuff into a spreadsheet.
Okay.
Right. And so if you know the calculation you're doing, you can force it to put it into a spreadsheet, and then you will get the right answer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because where I'm working is trying to break the hydrogen off of water inside a fuel injector.
Okay.
So we're talking huge pressures and turbulence.
So you're doing electrolysis inside a fuel injector.
Well, it's everything I can think of that will help, because if it was easy to do, we'd have no water on the planet. So this stuff doesn't break off easy, right?
I know what you mean. Yep.
Yeah. So it put it this way: I can't do it right now, but I can see how it could be done. It just needs a lot of steel alloy and stuff like that, material advances to get it to work.
Okay.
Because then we just use a diesel engine, pour water into it through the fuel injectors, and you drive away. That's where I'm going, but I haven't got there yet.
Okay.
All right, thanks. That's all I just want to say.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Wayne, hello.
Good afternoon, guys. Dr. Rob, I got a quick question, I'll hang up. What causes buffering on TV? Like we got the Fire Stick thing, and every once in a while it starts, that buffering circle comes out in the middle. What causes that?
Yeah.
And I'll let you go. Thank you.
Okay, so this is one of the issues with we have on demand, and so we've got to pipe a lot of information over the internet. And so anyone who uses the internet on a regular basis will know that you get what's called network dropouts. And so that means that you lose the stream of connection. And in fact, the way that we send video is a lower quality, or in most cases, it doesn't have to be, but in most cases, the way we send video is a lower quality protocol, as we call it. And so you will find over a period of time that things can degrade. And then eventually, if you have a complete dropout, the information rate just falls down. You have a pause in the stream. You have a buffer, so hopefully you don't feel the effect of that. But if you use up all of that buffer, you literally play it, and then you haven't had any more data come in, then you will see the system go into what you've called a buffering mode. It's literally going to wait until it's got stuff downloaded so it can start playing again. And it's all about network dropouts, ultimately.
Okay, that's it, I guess.
Yep.
Okay. Email question from Joseph. By the way, if you'd like to talk to Rob Thacker, you know the drill, 902-405-6000. Joseph says this via email, says, I realize this is a long astrophysics question.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm sure Dr. Thacker can provide an answer. There you go. There's a vote of confidence.
Okay.
So given the recent detection of methane and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere of exoplanet K2-18b, how confident can we be that these signals are not the result of, I don't even know how to pronounce this, abiotic processes such as photochemistry or volcanism?
Okay. Yeah.
Instead of potential biosignatures.
And the long and short of it is, we can't, right? So I think this is really important for people to know. So K2-18b is this planet that's got a lot of media coverage recently because there was and actually, it's not methane that's causing the issue. It's something called dimethyl sulfide. Mm-hmm. And so that's been reported in huge amounts in the atmosphere. So in our atmosphere, it's produced by algae in the oceans at fairly low concentrations, although possibly it could play a role in how the overall atmosphere works, but we're not sure on that. But on this particular planet, we've found a signal. Now, not everyone agrees that it's the signal for DMS. I'll call the molecule that. But it's possibly and looking pretty good like it is now, but we're not sure. We do need to get more data on this to confirm. So that's really what people are getting all excited about. But the reality is there have been detections of dimethyl sulfide in the tails of comets. There are known photochemical reactions that will create it. And so at the end of the day, what we have to do is to do more of these chemical tests to see if there are ways that we can produce these molecules that are not created by biota, i.e. life? And so it's a great question, and it's one that people really are taking very seriously.
Fair enough. 902-405-6000. Another email question. This one from Mark says, looking into the future with man's interest in colonizing another planet, how are scientists and other professionals considering ways to deal with the psychological aspect of spending months, even years of isolation together? After all, we are only humans and with many faults and separate personalities.
So there's one really, really big challenge in doing all of this research, and it's difficult, right? So the challenge that we have is when we do these long-term habitat studies where we literally lock people away for 500 days, the element of danger is not the same for those studies as it would be going on a spacecraft to Mars with just you, your friends, and a bunch of medical equipment, right? And I think that really does make a difference, right? Now, there are some things that the psychologists have studied in these particular experiments and so on, but generally they haven't been that successful. People do sometimes get really frustrated with one another. It happens. It's human. And so all of we've seen a real change in terms of like what people think is a good astronaut, right? So it used to be like, if you go back to the 50s and 60s, this was like really risky stuff. So these were kind of like serious like test pilots and so on. And now it's much more about people who are calm, very high performing, but don't jump to conclusions and are good problem solvers, right? That's what astronauts have become. And so for a mission going to Mars or something like that, you want people who can really get along, who are very diplomatic. And so, but you know, the stress of being in that kind of situation is very, very hard to replicate, right? So I kind of think that what we may see happen, but again, it's just not the same. The stress is not the same. What we may see happen is sort of like missions that go out for 3 or 4 weeks outside of the moon's orbit and so on, and then come back again, doing tests on that kind of thing.
Why not just go unmanned altogether with this stuff, or unpersoned, whatever terminology we're going to use in this day and age?
Well, we've done it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we literally have been putting rovers on Mars for a long time. The rovers are great, right? They've done a lot of good science, but they're not adaptive, right? They're set up to do certain things, and it's very difficult to make them change. Whereas humans are very adaptive. Of course, you can tell me, but they cost so much more, which is completely true, right? But in terms of like scientific studies, you can do so much more with a human, right? You are admittedly limited by what experiments and equipment you take with you. Yeah. That's absolutely true, right? So you're only as good as the lab that you have with you. But humans can make toast really well.
Yeah. But is it partly, I don't want to say ego or whatever terminology you want to use, but pride, a point of pride to have flesh and bone on Mars? Is that part of it?
Yeah, I think that's true. Right, yeah. But I'm not necessarily sure that it's pride. I think it's like a human quest for discovery, conquest, whatever you want to call it. And that's not
ambition. Then I guess ambition might be a better
word.
Yeah.
So that isn't going away. Human beings are wired to do that, as far as I can tell. Right. I mean, if you look at the history of humans, they've just expanded over the planet. Yeah. Right. So clearly there is an urge to sort of like go and see the new places.
Yeah,
right.
I've heard, and perhaps incorrectly, that exploring the absolute depths of the ocean is more complex than traveling in outer space. Is that true or not?
I would question whether it's more complex, but I would say it is incredibly dangerous, right? Because you're dealing with such high pressures that any fault in the engineering and you're toast, right? You can say that's true in space. You've got time in space. Like if you get a leak, you've got time. If you get a leak down at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, you're toast, right? So it's not the same, right? The risks are actually really significant for deep ocean exploration. And so you can build things that are good enough to go down. And so all the bathyspheres and so on, right? James Cameron developed that submersible as well, but it's risky.
Yeah, we saw that with the Titan sub, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that was just, let's be honest, that was not a smart design.
No.
Right? And a lot of people were criticizing it as was literally disclosed after the accident.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
I mean, it's literally taking a new material and putting it in a situation that it's not really going to be good at.
Right.
Right.
Okay, give us a call. We got some time to the top of the hour. Got Rob Thacker to the top of the hour, 902-405-6000. If you'd like to chat with Rob, if you've got a science-related question, give us a buzz, 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, the Science Files continues with Rob Thacker, astrophysicist, St. Mary's University. Give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. And while we wait some more calls, go over some stories that you sent along.
Sure.
This one, the headline, and I believe it's from the website, is it Phys.org? Is that what it is?
Phys.org, yep.
Phys.org. The headline, scientists find evidence that challenges theories of the origin of water on Earth. Interesting. Tell us about the detail.
So this one is really interesting. And so we've talked a little bit about how water got to the Earth on the show a bit before, but I'll just sort of like run through. So if you go back to the 1970s, people thought it was brought to the Earth by comets, right? Because we see comets and they're just basically huge dirty ice balls. And people thought, well, maybe that brought a bunch of water to the Earth. Yeah. And it turns out that doesn't work, right? Yeah. And there's something called the isotopic ratios that don't work for the particular type of water that we get from comets. And so then over the next sort of like 2 or 3 decades, there was more belief that, perhaps it comes to the Earth in what's called hydrated minerals. So that's minerals with water kind of locked into them, and then it gets released, right? And that became really like a fundamental theory of how we believed that water got to the Earth, right? There were sort of like these hydrated minerals in asteroids bringing all of this water to the Earth. And so what this new theory has done, and so they've taken a small meteorite, cut it open, and then they've looked at what's inside, and they found that there's actually a lot of hydrogen in there, right? And so if that's the case, that actually hydrogen was somehow locked into the structure of the meteorites, then instead of bringing actually water, it could have been bringing hydrogen, which then reacted with oxygen to form water. So it may have been that actually we had a lot that was brought to the Earth as hydrogen rather than as just water first.
Interesting. 902-405-6000. Hello, Bobby.
Hello, gentlemen. My question is there the same amount of water on Earth today than, like a million years ago?
Oh, that's a good question. My answer, I would have to check on this, but my answer is I don't think we're going to have a lot of evaporative losses through the atmosphere for it. So I don't think that it's going to change. Where things may have changed is the amount that's locked up in different parts. So like the amount of available fresh water, the amount of available salt water versus ice and things like that. Those are definitely changing over time. But I can't think of an obvious reason for why there would have been any significant changes in the overall amount other than locking it into hydrated minerals, ironically. But that's about all I can come up with. Yeah.
Interesting. And then another quick one. If the Earth's temperature, or when it does rise, say 2 degrees, will that make evaporation happen easier, and then we'll have more cloud coverage and stuff, it will rain a lot more?
That is a really big question right there. And so this is something that has been debated by climate scientists for a long time, that would, if we had significant changes in the evaporation rate, we have more clouds formed. And there was one very famous skeptic called Richard Lindzen who had a number of theories on this, and then that would actually end up increasing the Earth's albedo and cool it down. But all that said and done, the actual situation with clouds is much more complicated than simply increasing the albedo. If you have a lot more clouds at nighttime, you actually keep heat in. Right, so there's not actually as much evidence for it actually being a mechanism for cooling the planet as was thought. So it's actually quite complicated to work through.
Okay, is albedo like the reflection or the absorption?
Yeah, the amount of reflection. How much energy do we bounce back into space because it's literally coming down, reflecting off something that's broadly white. And so the ice caps is an area where obviously we have high albedo. Although ironically, as I point out, they're actually low angle of incidence as well. So the stuff that comes in at a very shallow angle on those areas.
Okay, interesting. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Carolyn, hello.
Hi, fellas. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Well.
Oh, I'm good, thanks. Congratulations, Todd, on your recent marriage.
Thank
Hope you
you.
and Kelly have many healthy, happy years ahead of you.
Thank you so much.
He's still smiling.
No problem. Oh, that's a good thing. Love your show, Dr. Rob, and I just calling to remind everybody that it's Earth Day today. So happy Earth Day.
And look after your Earth, because it looks after you.
For sure. So if some people can do something nice today for Mother Earth, I'm going to go pick up litter, which I do every day because there's too much of it out there. So just wanted to give everybody a friendly reminder. Thanks for all you do.
Okay, great.
Thanks so much.
Even just making sure you turn your lights off, you're doing something for the planet.
There you go. Take care. Thanks,
Yeah.
Carolyn.
You're welcome.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Paul, hello.
Yeah, good afternoon. Dr. Thacker, a couple of weeks ago, there was a stir by Colossal Biosciences where they claimed to have de-extincted the dire wolf.
Okay.
Is this a legitimate claim?
So I haven't read enough about this to be really sure. I did I did scan a couple of newspaper clips about this, and so I heard that there was a debate over whether it actually was the true DNA of the direwolf. But at the same time, even if that wasn't true, a lot of people felt that what had actually been done was nonetheless technically quite impressive.
I've seen videos of these animals, and yeah, it is quite impressive. It may be a hybrid animal, but it certainly looks like nothing I've seen before.
Yep.
They also claim to be working on woolly mammoths, things like the dodo, passenger pigeon.
So you can imagine what the challenge is with a woolly mammoth, though, can't you? What are you going to actually gestate it in, right? And so the answer to that is an elephant, and all sorts of ethical questions then start because of that.
Right. I agree, but I mean the import for even living endangered species is it's fantastic. Red wolves, for example, if they can find other sources of red wolf DNA, they could broaden the gene pool.
Sure. And so I've just pulled up something. So, yeah, a New Scientist says that it's not technically the dire wolf. They're actually grey wolves with genetic edits.
Yeah, probably 99.9% gray wolf and the 0.1% dire wolf.
Well, as you know, there's not a lot of difference in DNA at all between different species.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But, with more recent species like the passenger and the dodo, I mean, if they come out with something that looks, and in every other way is a dodo, I think they've got a pretty good claim of...
well, where are they getting the genetic information from, though?
A lot of tooth enamel things, inside teeth, where it's quite protected.
Okay.
There are samples of the dodo, in museums that...
Sure. That's very true.
And by combining multiple samples, they're able to kind of say, well, this is, these are the common parts. Yeah. Anyhow, it's interesting and kind of scary at the same time, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of ethical issues, and so we have to work through those. Right, and part of the problem is there will be some labs where they just ignore it, as we saw with CRISPR editing of embryos.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, getting over to the human side, that's very worrisome. Okay, just looking for your opinion on the de-extinction thing. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it very much. Take care. All right, that's a wrap. Rob Thacker, thanks for coming in. We appreciate it as always, my friend.
Always a pleasure. And thanks, everyone, for the great questions.
All right. That's great stuff. That's Rob Thacker. That's the Science Files. We do that each and every Tuesday from noon until 1. I'd like to thank Blake Priddle on the other side of the glass today. Vanessa was away. She should be back tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in and listening, everybody. We appreciate it very, very much. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.